Hi, it's Richard from Ignite Growth, and in this video I'm going to follow on from my other B2B sales videos that I've done, and in one of those I talked about being human, holistic and helpful, and that applied really to your sales process. So you're trying to align a sales process with how people make a buying decision in your industry. So in B2B, you've probably got a sector or a vertical that you've identified in the strategy phase, and that's where you're going to be focusing your efforts, your sales and marketing efforts. Marketing to generate the lead, then handing those leads over to sales, and sales turn those leads into sales opportunities and hopefully close them into customers and revenue for the business. So one of the core mistakes that I find business owners and sales teams making is that they don't have a structured sales process. They tend to be winging it, a lot of them. They tend to get leads from all different sources. They're not really pre-qualifying them. They're not really a good fit for what they do. So they tend to be spending their time trying to sell to everybody out there. Really, that broadcast mentality I talked about in the Being Human, Holistic and Helpful video is driven by the sales team a lot of the time. They're really broadcasting out there and hopefully attracting one person that they can then engage into maybe have a meeting with, engage in a sales conversation, maybe pitch, get the pitch deck out and start pitching to them. And this isn't really what modern B2B sales is about. Modern B2B sales is all about nurturing relationships. So we're going to nurture relationships, going to add value at every stage of that relationship, answer questions, answer obviously pain points, answer worries, answer fears that people may have. And then as we move people naturally along their buying and decision making process, then we should naturally have sales conversations and naturally close that conversation as well. And that's really what I think a 4-step sales process does. It also allows you to measure how your sales process is working, how your team are working. Each of the elements has its own core skills they have to master, and it really allows you to zero in on where those roadblocks are to give you a really predictable sales process that's very natural, that people are happy to be led through, and that answers all the questions as they go through that process. So let's go through those 4 steps in this video, and from there I'll have a number of other videos probably off this, just looking at each of the individual steps as well. But in this video I just wanted to look at the importance of having set structured stages to your sales process. So the 4 steps that I recommend you focus on really follow the inbound mentality to selling. So the first of those is identify. So step 1's identify. Step 2 is connect. Step 3 is to explore. And step 4 is to advise. Now, nearly every business, every sector, every B2B business I speak to is going through these stages in some way or another. But as I say, a lot of it's very haphazard. It's not really been put into a set sales process that's being mapped out, and each stage is being worked on. Because what you want to do here is have a percentage. So between each of these stages, we've got a sales conversion. And obviously on the advise stage, it's either then closed 1 or closed, lost. So you've then got closed 1 or closed lost as your result at the end of this process. So if every single lead and everyone went through this process, then you've got 4 set metrics to measure there, haven't you? You've got 4 set sales metrics to build into your core of your sales metrics to know whether your sales process is working or it isn't working, and where the blocks are. So an average sales process, I would say you're aiming to convert 1 in 5, so at 20%. When people start applying this principle, they find that goes very quickly up to 1 in 4, goes up to 25% of leads being converted, and I've seen sales processes where you get up to 40 or 50%. You can get up to 1 in 2. So what the knock-on effect of that is is suddenly your marketing budget is super targeted. You're not having to spend more because you don't need more traffic, and you're targeting the right people. So identify is key. If this is a I'm talking about sales process here, and if you're actually giving inbound leads to your sales team as well, then your marketing's doing a lot of the lead gen for you. But in this, I'm talking about a sales specific organization. So identify, this stage is all about putting work in before you reach out to people to connect, to see that they're the right person. They're from the right sector. They are the right person within that company you need to be initially talking to and reaching out to. You know, you need to do research then on the company. I would spend 15 to 20 minutes on LinkedIn looking at the company. I would then go to the website of the company and look at their blog posts, look at their latest news, see what they're talking about generally. Then on LinkedIn, identify all the key decision makers. So it may well be the operations director that you need to be in front of for your service or your product, but I can guarantee they will then be speaking to the CEO. They'll probably bring in the finance director. Maybe the sales and marketing directors are involved as well. So it all depends what that makeup of that company and that target company looks like. If it's a big corporate though, you can guarantee in B2B there'll be multiple people involved in that decision making. So yes, you want to know your champion. This is my decision maker. This is the person who'll be making the decision. But then start thinking about, who else do I need to know about? Who else do I need to be connected around that person? Because you can guarantee they'll be going back and these discussions will be happening in the background. So you need to make sure everybody in that decision-making team is going to be informed, and each has their own different drivers. So as I say, it's really important that you spend time on the identify stage. But I'm really in the identify stage. The core thing we're trying to do is identify if they're a good fit or a poor fit. Okay. Are they a good fit for what you do? Do they come from the right sector? Are they the right size company? A lot of the metrics you'll have done in the strategy phase where you're actually building out a good fit matrix. And again, I'll do another video on what a good fit matrix is. But basically, you should be running every lead through a good fit matrix to see that they are a good fit for what you do. That's really key. That should be black or white. Yes, they're the right size, the right sector, you know, all the key elements are ticked, so that's a yes, or they're not. And again, this is really key at the start of your process, because you don't want to be spending lots of time on poor fit people, because they're the ones that will sap all your time. You'll end up trying to convince them, whereas good fit people, if they're then on the next stage, which is in the buying process, so are they in buying process? So yes, they're a good fit and they're in the buying process. So a lot of this, again, if you have a good CRM and you can see what content they're consuming, you'll be able to make a very, very educated decision on, yes, this person's a great fit and they are also starting the buying process. There's something that's starting here. There's a definite intent to buy. So again, those two things have to be in place in Identify. And I think you can get 90% of this information prior to ever connecting with anybody. So really important stage that a lot of people skip. They just try to connect with as many people as possible. Don't do that. Identify, look at the key criteria that you've identified in your own good fit matrix, and you know exactly what your ideal customer profile looks like. So your ideal customer profile, remember, is sector and company. So what are the firmographic details that you need to be ticking? It might be geographic. It might be that you work with certain companies in a region. So you need to, that's one of your factors. Yes, they're in the right region, the right size company, right sector. So again, you're identifying a good fit person. And then, are they actively buying? Are they showing intent to buy at this stage? Because again, they're going to be far easier to take through this process than someone who, yes, they're a good fit, but no, they're clearly not actively buying. They're not an active buyer, they're a passive buyer. So if they're a passive buyer, they may well be a good fit and be buying in 6 months' time. Well, then they need to go into a slightly different approach to your traditional sales approach. But if they're actively buying now, and they're a good fit, then you can guarantee it's worth spending your time with as a company or as a salesperson to get that person engaged, connect in the right way. So then we'll move on to connect. And obviously in the modern world there's multiple ways to connect, but what I'm trying to do here is get a connect call of around 15 minutes max. So I'm trying to get a connect call stage of around 15 minutes max at that stage, because then if I can have that, and that might be via Zoom or Teams, it might be a virtual one, it might be on the phone. Those would usually be my two ways of having a connect call. I don't think email is a good thing. That's usually a way to connect, but that should lead to a 15-minute connect call. Because again, the 15-minute connect call is going to be all about them. Again, you're going to just really use the information you've got in your identify stage to start creating a relationship here. Of course, there may be a physical meeting. But again, what's the danger with a physical meeting? To me, it's a lot of time for this 15 minutes. Because really in here, you're really going through the information you've got in your identify stage and just seeing if there is an intent to buy, and they are going through some of the pains that you can solve with your solution, your product or your service. So you're really talking about their world, their position, you know, and once you've identified that there's definitely something to talk about and expand on, then you need to know the other people who are involved in that decision-making process. So at the end of this call, you're really leading towards a longer exploratory call. And for me, that would definitely be better in person or virtual here. Certainly wouldn't be on the phone from there, would it? So when I'm finishing this call here, I'm trying to move them then into a minimum of a 1 hour exploratory. So you're exploring here. So I've got an exploratory call going with this client. And at the end of the connect call, I'm saying, who else is involved in this decision that we should have on the next call? It sounds like we've got plenty to talk about. There's plenty of areas we can help, and there's certainly some additional advice I can give you. So again, to get everybody involved in the exploratory call, you need to make sure that all the decision makers are on here. All the decision-making group around that person is involved in that call. So that's really key that you set that next call up correctly. And what I also do here is send out a questionnaire. That won't fit on there. Send out a questionnaire here at the end of this call. I said I'll send you out a quick questionnaire just so we get maximum value out of this hour together. I'll also recap what we've talked about in here. So there'll be a recap email and a questionnaire going out. Sometimes I'll also send a video about working with us, who we are, just so they can share that video amongst their decision-making group before we meet them here at the exploratory call. We now get to the exploratory call, and we're either in person or virtual again. And this, the important thing here is it's all about them. Okay, so it's all about them as the exploratory call until the last 5 or 10 minutes. Then we may touch on our solution, touch on what we're going to talk about, and we have a way to address all of the challenges that have come up. But this exploratory call is really in depth. It's understanding exactly what their situation is and the areas you can help them in. Okay, you also want to talk a little bit about budget, things like that in here, so it's not a surprise here. But all of that exploratory call should be about them. And then I would say, in mine, it's the last 5 mins to 10 mins about us. Okay, so the last 5 to 10 minutes is going to be about us, but everything else in that hour-long call is about them. So you're really giving loads of value, you're really understanding, asking lots of questions, and it's all these open questions that you can answer and get all the information in. Obviously that's going in your CRM as well from this call. This should then come through to advise stage, which is going to be some form of presentation. And again, the key with a good presentation is very personal. It's very personal to these people here. Shows you've totally understood their position that they're in. As well as understanding the position, you've come up with a solution and options as well. I would come up with solution and options and then next steps. Okay, so again, once you've gone through that presentation, and I would say this has to be a structured, very structured presentation. Yes, it needs personalizing, but it's got to be something that you've worked on as a PowerPoint deck that is structured, leads them through recapping all your conversations to date, your understanding of the situation, your understanding of the challenges, your understanding of who their target market is, and then your solution presentation here that should naturally lead into next steps from there. And then with the next steps, you can actually say, and this is what it looks like from here, Mr. Prospect. Okay, this is what happens next. This is what happens next. You're being as transparent as possible. You're making it very easy for them to make a decision. Because all really I want to do when I leave a presentation with a client is I want them to know that we're the best solution for them, that we're the people they want to work with. It should literally come down to a yes or no. They can either afford it or they can't afford it. You know, it shouldn't be anything else other than a yes, no, and that's where you get your closed won and closed lost. And even when they're closed lost, I'll do another video on how you'll get another 20% of business back by chasing those closed lost deals, the ones that you thought had gone. But if you chase them up regularly, a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, and you have a process nearly automated, I would use email automation for this, have a workflow going from your CRM, just to stay in contact with these people. And we pick 1 in 5 back up again because they get let down by the other people that they decided to go with and it didn't happen quite as they thought. And as I say, if you've left them wanting to work with you, to save a few pennies, they probably go with someone who's a little bit cheaper than you. But we don't want to be getting down to that situation when we're positioning ourselves in the marketplace. As I say in other videos, I've talked about why you position yourself as a specialist, as the expert, because people will pay the expert to work with them. It will never come down to price. If you're coming down to price here and losing a lot of deals here, then I would go back to the start and say, let's look at our positioning. Are we positioning ourselves well enough here throughout this process? Okay, does that all make sense? I know it's about 15 minutes long, that video, but I wanted to go through those 4 steps. Really important because each of them then has a metric to measure it. And you'll see in my lapse video that I talk about lapse reporting as your core sales metrics that you report on. It follows this process through as well. But this process also aligns with how people make buying decisions. So they're identifying is when we're connecting, we're talking about their pain points, their challenges, their problems. We're starting to understand that they have a problem that we need to help them solve. We're then exploring that deeper. So we're looking at all the different options they have. So that's like the decision-making stage where you have an awareness stage where I've got a problem I need to solve. I then go into this consideration stage where I look at all the companies and all the solutions and ways I can sort the problem. So I'm defining my problem and refining it. So this is all about understanding and then looking at the options. And then your advice phase is really like your decision-making phase in a standard buying process. So again, it'll align with how people naturally buy now as well. All right, so hopefully that was useful for you. I just wanted to put that video together because it's something I talk a lot about with clients, and I spend time in strategy at the strategic end as well, mapping out what a sales process looks like. Because every industry's business is different, every business is different. But if we get those 4 core steps in, then it gives us something to measure, something to improve, something to optimize at each stage and just make sure it works really well until we get this conversion percentage up around the 30-40%. And that'll usually be getting better quality leads in at the top here. Okay, so hopefully talk to you again soon. I will leave you there and look forward to talking to you in the next video. Cheers now.